talk about Perlo. Am I saying it right?
Perlu.
Perlu, okay.
Perlu.
So describe what Perlu is.
Not really sure yet. We're figuring it out as we go. I'm a native Ohioan. Got classically French trained in pastries in Cincinnati, of all places. Left Ohio to learn the savory side of cooking in Charleston, South Carolina, and kind of was befriended by these African American women that came and bussed themselves into the hotel where I was the pastry chef. They were room attendants there, and I was living by myself in Charleston. This was 17 years ago. And these women fascinated me. They wore these tignons on their head. They dressed a certain way, and they had their own language and their own kind of way of caring about themselves. And I learned that they were the Gullah people. Gullah, G-U-L-L-A-H. A lot of people don't know about them. They're indigenous to these islands off the coast of the Carolinas. Originally from Africa, the west coast of Africa, brought in as slaves in the early 1800s to these plantations that were the islands off of Charleston in the Carolinas. But actually they spread all the way from St. Augustine, Florida, all the way up to North Carolina. So there was prolific all the way up through there. And they were brought into the Gullah people to work on these plantations on these islands because they were impervious to the mosquitoes and the malaria that were dying off all these other workers there from the tribes they were from in Africa. But after a while, the slave owners couldn't live there anymore. There was a virus that killed indigo and cotton. And basically the land was no longer workable. At least they thought they couldn't make any money off of it. So it was actually one of the first instances of slave owners giving the land back or giving the land to the slaves. So
whoa, hang on.
Yeah, absolutely.
The plantation owners
Yes.
on these
islands off the coast of
South Carolina, North Carolina.
Correct. And Georgia.
And Georgia. So
Yes.
St. Vincent's Island, was that one of them?
I'm not sure if that, you can look that up.
So these islands, they gave the islands to the people who had been the slaves.
That's correct. One of the
Were
first
slaves
instances.
freed as a result of that, or were they just property owners?
I'm not sure
This is really interesting.
the exact, they were free to do what they want with the islands. And actually some of them were free enough to leave South Carolina to go find the rest of their families that had been kind of sold off in the slave trade to West Louisiana in Texas in the mid-1800s. And they kind of went on this trail through the Carolinas, through Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. And at the same time they were headed through Louisiana, they were the same people that were leaving, being expelled from their country up in Nova Scotia or Canada, called the Acadians. So they met up with the Acadians at the exact same time. I know you're probably wondering why I'm telling this long about story, but it's going to all tie in.
Really interesting. So,
They taught the Acadians how to use rice and to fish and hunt down here, and the Acadians turned it into jambalaya. Perlu, actually, and that's from the name of my restaurant. So these Gullah people, I befriended them, and I would bring them up French pastries to where they had their own little, kind of like a public area where they gathered up at the hotel, and they would leave to do the rooms, and I would drop them off desserts. At first I'd try to talk to them, they didn't want anything to do with me, so they'd always shoo me away. I dropped them off desserts, and they came back and they finally kind of took a liking to me, so they brought me in, and I would leave with them to go on holidays and weekends to the islands with them, and they taught me how to hunt and to fish and to cook. And my favorite dish that they taught me was perlu, and it was a shrimp and rice dish. So I decided, since this is a Southern regional restaurant in the Southern Food and Beverage Museum, what not a better thing to do than to name a restaurant in honor of them, and I called it Perlu.
That is a really great story. So a typical perlu is what?
It's like a paella, almost.
Okay, like a paella.
Yeah, you'll find most coastal communities where they grow rice all have a different or a variation of a paella type of dish. So it was their version. So when it was shrimp season, they would do shrimp and rice purloo, and then when they couldn't get the shrimp, they would usually do it with chicken as well.
Or blackbirds?
Blackbirds, I'm not sure. They use that a lot, actually. Yes.
I'm actually very familiar with the Cajuns using blackbirds
Yeah.
over the rice fields.
Cool.
When they're netting them.
That's
But
all right.
anyhow,
Exactly. Nope.
Whatever
Whatever was,
to waste.
whatever they had on hand, whatever they could get. Exactly. That's what they could do. Yep.
So, why New Orleans?
Why did I move to New Orleans, or why did I do Purloo in New Orleans?
All of the above.
I moved to New Orleans 17 years ago. I did my externship from culinary school here. Worked with the Brennan family on Royal Street. I met Emeril in Charleston 17 years ago before he was famous outside of really New Orleans, and he really inspired me. He saw that I had a true love of culture and history and food, and we talked. He was at a charity event at the same hotel, and kind of shared a lot of these conversations about what my next step would be after culinary school, and he convinced me to come down here to New Orleans, and so that's what I did.
And opening up the restaurant, what did it take to do that? How did you begin this association with the Southern Food and Beverage?
I met Liz and those guys through the museum years ago, actually, by doing some events with them. And I was doing some consulting work. I love doing design and not only of restaurants, but of menus as well and concepts. And I had some great conversations with Liz, and I loved the concept of what they were doing. I knew they were moving out of the old space into the new space. I came by here, and I loved what used to be here, and it was known for years and years and years as pretty much a destitute area of New Orleans, a dangerous area of New Orleans, but at one time, probably one of the most vibrant areas of New Orleans. And I thought, what an amazing way to leave my mark on New Orleans of this kind of love affair that I've had, was to do something in this area and to help bring it back as well. So I thought I could kind of work with her and leave my mark, so to speak.
When you say this area was historically a really interesting and great
Central
area,
City, yes.
I'm sorry?
Central City, that's where we are.
And so you're talking way before Katrina.
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Way, yes. After Katrina, it got a lot worse even, actually. Yes. People fled out of this area. It got really dangerous. But I don't know if you researched the history of this area. This was in the 1840s on till about the 1960s. Aretha Castle Haley Boulevard was actually Dryad Street.
I remember Dryads.
Dryads, and this was the shopping and retail and cultural corridor for all the African Americans, not only in New Orleans, but all throughout the South as well. They weren't allowed to actually shop on Canal Street, so they all shopped on this corridor right here. So a lot of the buildings were owned by Jewish merchants catering to African Americans. So people from all over the South used to come here just to shop on from 3 blocks away till another 2 blocks this way. We're sitting in the kind of heart of all that right now.
Do you still see African Americans on the street?
Absolutely.
Coming into your restaurant?
Yeah, and they love it too. That's what I did 2.5 years ago when I kind of came into this project. One of the things I did was I walked around and just started talking to people, seeing what they thought, Hey, my name is Ryan. I'm thinking about maybe doing a restaurant here. What's your relationship? Blah, blah, blah. And so I've done that ever since and continue to do that. Yes. Very important.
So tell me about the food you serve here. What is it?
I do true Southern regional, at least I think it's true Southern regional. Leading up to this project, the project was about maybe 8 months behind, like everything else in New Orleans, putting together construction, such a big undertaking what we did here. So I had about 8 months of free time, I guess you could say. So I used my time wisely and testing my concept of a true Southern regional restaurant. I did it as a pop-up restaurant every week. So I did almost 144 pop-ups in a row.
Would you define
A pop-up is basically a dinner, a prefix dinner usually. So I did between 5 and 7 courses, at different places all over the city. I did some from abandoned churches to on top of rooftops, buildings, to cooking schools and whatnot. And each one was literally a different Southern regional theme. So I never repeated a theme, a dinner, any menu items. So I just, every single,
140.
I did 144 of them in a row, all by myself, and just totally tweaked out in it, and I loved it. And it was a way to challenge not only myself, but to bring the word of Perlu and what I was doing. So it got pressed locally and nationally what I was doing. And so it kind of helped garner kind of steam into opening this up as well. And it got to really push me and challenge me because I had to learn. Like I did a North Carolina pop-up and I'd never even been to North Carolina. So I wanted to learn the regional indigenous cuisines of that area. So I started studying up on it, and it forced me to learn the different things. And what even forced me even more was that I started making a name for myself, not just for me as a chef, but as Perlu in the pop-ups that got really well attended. So people would look, there's a lot of people that had moved into the city after Katrina from all over, not only the South, but all over the United States. So people would wait until I was doing a pop-up that represented their area and would come here and even fly in specifically for that pop-up to do. So that put even more pressure on me that, hey, I better not always BS this thing. I better do the right thing as well. So it was fun, it was cool. And people would be like, and the biggest compliments I would have was, that reminds me of exactly my grandmother's dish that I did, that she would make for Thanksgiving. And we would do stuff like that, and that's when I knew that I was hopefully doing the right thing on the right path and move forward.
So what are your aspirations now?
Just keep on doing what I'm doing. Yeah, you'll hear a lot of people like, they open up a restaurant, they're successful. Oh, I'm gonna open up another one, this, and that. No, I just wanna do this and keep doing it right. That's the gig. No.
If there were something you could tell anybody who would be interested in New Orleans about New Orleans, what would you tell them?
It is the true European city in the United States that we do not care what race, class, or creed you are from. We all sit down, we break bread together, we hang out together, we have a beer together, and it's all about just what you bring to the table, and that is it.
Awesome.
Yep.
Would you allow people to ask you questions?
Raise your hands.
So you said you tried cuisines that you never.
I can't hear you.
You said you tried doing cuisines that you had never actually been to the region.
I challenged myself by doing that, yes.
So how did you get sort of the recipes and the background knowledge to be able to do something like that?
The internet's an amazing place. I would actually contact farmers and growers and producers of different regions and talk to them on the phone and have them send me recipes. Not only recipes, but a lot of them would actually FedEx me and fly me product to help from what they were using, because they knew what I was doing and they would look it up. And so it was a way that, hey, I got free product, indigenous product, and then I would talk to people, or usually the farmers, the producers. I'm like, what about this recipe? I'm intrigued about this dish. And a lot of it is, there's so much out there now that you can research on it. And my secrets, and I guess I can tell you guys my secret, is this, is
Okay, film rolling, right?
church cookbooks. Yep, are the best. Because of these little ladies are sharing their recipe secrets, and a lot of them have been handed down from generation to generation, and they like to document it and make money off of it and to share it. So a lot of them I would look through, and that was my inspiration for a lot of my stuff as well. I didn't really talk to chefs or Google restaurants or nothing like that. That didn't interest me at all. More just what people grew up eating and where it came from and where it was produced.
So did that help in sort of expanding who came to your pop-ups?
Absolutely. Yeah. People totally dug it. Like, people would follow me on my pop-ups of what I was doing, and they're like, that's so cool. How did you know that this came from? Or, I can't believe you even knew what a kolache was, which is, or Moravian spice cake, which is indigenous to North Carolina. So you start, the more I started talking to people, the more I started studying about Southern cuisine and Southern regional cuisines. I could ask you what your grandmother or great-grandmother cooked for Thanksgiving or Christmas. And by researching that, that's usually where you've been removed from where you'd come from, like your background, your heritage from either Eastern European, Western European, or whatnot. And I could align that recipe from the classical recipes that I was taught and those backgrounds. So I was French classically trained, and I know German, Italian, all the Spanish food. So I could take what your grandmother had taken, I'd be like, oh, this recipe, and I'd be like, oh, you're from Northern France. And they'd be like, how did you know that? I could take that recipe and how she'd make it because she was taught that by her ancestors that came here from a boat how long ago. And we are losing that now. We're forgetting all that stuff. You could be traced usually within 3 or 4 generations of us right now of when people came over. And it's an honor for me to start studying that stuff and actually bring it into fruition, into light through cooking now. And that's really what I want to study, you know. And people would see I would be doing these different dishes and they would totally trip out. They're like, oh my God, that's my grandmother made that. And I'd never even seen that since. And so it brings back, food evokes, not only, it satisfies the needs, but it evokes memories as well. And that's the most important thing. So we're telling stories through recipes, through dishes, and that's it. I'm not on TV all the time doing it, but people come in here and they try these different things, and I'm telling a story through a dish. And if you want to learn more about that story, I'll tell you about that story, because of every dish that I have, it's chock full of stories there. So I don't want it to be in your face, but through cooking and people tasting and eating, hopefully we can do that.
Poppy also mentioned fusion cooking.
Yes.
So it seems like your style of cooking is very much about the basics and the origins.
It's not about fusion at all.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Okay, so
Except for there's a new New Orleans cuisine and a new Southern cuisine. And that I dig into deeper. Especially you're talking a lot about Katrina, and afterwards there's a lot more. Well, before Katrina there was a lot of Vietnamese here in New Orleans, and now there's a lot more Hispanics and Hondurans. So there's a lot more of an influence of Latin American flavors and cuisines here in New Orleans. So I will do, I guess, a fusion of a few of those things together, but it's not a fusion cuisine at all. You know, it's more paying homage to these recipes and what people are doing.